cat-faced killer here. I want to talk to you about a title by Suenobu Keiko called Life. Quote, L-I-F-E, unquote. Though it's a manga, I believe there was a live dramatization of it, but I never saw it, so I'm not familiar with how accurate it is in comparison to the manga. The story of Life follows Ayumu Shiba, who at the very beginning of the story is going from middle school to high school. In Japan, you take tests. How well you take tests allow you to kind of pick and choose what schools you go into from middle school to high school, from high school to college. It's never a sure thing, but the better you do, the better chances you have of going wherever the fuck you want. So, in the very beginning, she and her best friend try to get into the same high school. Her best friend is known for being very smart. Ayumu was kind of a goofball and doesn't take studying very seriously, but she asks her friend for help studying so that they can get into the same high school. And she ends up making it. Her friend ends up failing. Her friend takes it very poorly. They split up, going their own separate ways, and Ayumu feels a lot of guilt. She feels that because her friend helped her study, her friend failed. To me, that's total cockamamie, but I can see middle grader girls coming to this kind of assumption. Right off the bat, kind of an angsty start. Personally, I was kind of worried this is going to be like a whole lot of woe is me. In the beginning, there is quite a bit of woe is me, but that's because the thing that draws me to this title, this deals with bullying. Life is a story about bullying and Ayumu having the choice, a choice that many people are faced with when it comes to a lot of negative life experiences that we have to face. And she has to either fold or start taking the steps and pushing forward and keep going forward. This is a story of that struggle. I think it's a very good story of that struggle. I'm going to come out and say, before I delve into this, I'm going to give it middle of the road first class. This is one of the first shoujo anything I ever read, and we both know I haven't read a whole lot of shoujo anything. In trend with that, for some reason, one of the best shoujo anything I've ever read or watched. Personally, I rate it higher. It's probably just underneath Hall of Fame, but we work with finding the right stories for the right people. So, just in the general sort of anime or manga appreciator, this is something that people should read. It's painful to read. It's heavy. It's a burden onto yourself, honestly. But I feel that not everything you read should be funny. It shouldn't make you feel happy or feel good about yourself. There should be some things to counterbalance that. We shape our lives with our experiences, and when they're not experienced directly and we're getting it from somebody else, a narrative, it needs to give you something. It needs you to give you something to take with you to help shape you. That's how you can grow, through reading or watching or experiencing somebody else's stories. Our lives are defined mostly by our failures and then also by our successes. They counterbalance each other. Our lives are also shaped by burdens, things we have to carry with us for the rest of our lives, and brevity, the load being lightened in some way, shape, or form. These two sets of counterbalances is literally all that shapes our lives. It's what makes us who we are. In a very basic level, this is what shapes our lives. And I feel that the manga, Life, it gives you something. It's a very heavy story. It gives you a little bit of a burden to take with you for the rest of your life. And because of that, it's worth reading, regardless of your tastes. Especially because bullying comes up in anime and manga so often. It's always made me wonder, is this like a really big epidemic in Japan? I figure probably not, but I think if it is a real big problem in Japan, it's probably not quite on the level of what happens in the manga Life, but this is probably towards the deeper end, if it's really this big of a problem. The reason why I feel more strongly about this story on a personal level than other people might coming into it that have nothing to do with bullying or stuff the main character goes through, which one of the biggest things early on is to cope with the stress and the guilt and everything, Ayumu begins cutting herself. I've known somebody who cut themselves, and I can't imagine the kind of pain the person was going through, but I am also proud that I'm the reason they stopped cutting. I wanted to see her stop cutting herself. I have that personal connection to Ayumu when I was reading this. And I actually never finished this story until recently, because it really is that heavy of a burden. But because I met that person and I helped them stop cutting, it finally gave me the gumption to see this story all the way through, and I'm glad I did. I really am. Ayumu is put in that situation where she has to face a bad situation, or she has to just give up on life, basically. I mean, whether it's becoming a recluse, which you see often in anime manga, or just running away or something, or choosing to face it and taking that slow march forward. This is not a spoiler. She takes that slow march forward. And this is a character that, even though, especially in the beginning, she is a vulnerable character, maybe a little too vulnerable for my tastes, but seeing her dig down and make that decision and that commitment and stick to it, I feel it's done very well compared to, what we normally see, which is like somebody's getting bullied, they either take it and they deal with it for the rest of the story, and something just happens so that the bullying stops. Or they stand up to them once, usually just verbally, and hey, the bullying is over with. I'm sure that's how it happens, occasionally, but that's how it almost always happens in anime or manga. And while it's fine and dandy and everything, you know me, when it comes to certain things, like, for example, fighting, I need a more realistic take on it than a cartoony take. Anime and manga usually addresses bullying in a more cartoony sort of fashion. Just hoping for the best, and society's kind of neglecting it and everything. Life is a more realistic take on it to me. I mean, I think it's kind of extreme, but I could see it being like on the deeper end of the bullying scale, especially if it actually is a problem in Japan. I don't know how much it is or not, but part of the thing that makes Life more of a readable sort of story, despite the pain and everything that you as a reader feel experiencing this story alongside Ayumu, is that, eventually everybody else is seeing this stuff. Everybody else is aware of it. Maybe even to some extent they join in it, or they're enabling it. Even if you're not doing anything, if you know it's happening, you're enabling it. And this story addresses those people, those bystanders, who are essentially allowing the bullying to happen through complacency or through joining in so that they themselves are protected from the bullying, or just through ignoring it, they don't want to have anything to do with it, or through just distancing themselves from it, they're allowing it. This story is mostly about Yumu, but I think the manga of Life touches on those tertiary people who are involved in bullying, whether they want to admit it or not, as well as the bullies, as well as the bullied, and the formerly bullied. In general, I just think it's a good story, but in particular with the subject of bullying and how it's handled in anime and manga, I think this is on that highest level of storytelling, and of how manga authors often use their stories to touch on things culturally, socially, politically. And this is one of those stories where the author really committed to that idea, and they did a very good job about it. The main thing I don't like about Life is there's two bullies for Ayumu. One of them has a posse, and the other one is a two-faced bastard. The one that has a posse is a girl. She has her little entourage. And there's something wrong with this girl in the head, okay? And there's times when she knows what she's doing is wrong, because a large part of the first half of this story is she's portrayed to at least seem like she believes she's the victim, and like Ayumu betrayed her early on, but around the middle of the story it becomes clear that she never really believed that, and it's kind of a 180 that you might expect or suspect, but it just, I don't know, I had a little bit of a problem with that, how fast that turned around. Just a little bit. Obviously, if I'm giving it a first class, I mean, it wasn't that big of a hiccup. It kind of took me aback a little bit. But then again, maybe I was just falling for her act. I don't know. I never really had to deal with bullies that much in my own life. Somebody tried to bully one of my friends when I was in grade school, and I fucking whooped his ass. And that was kind of the end of me and bullying. Now, the main dude actually isn't really the problem. He's one of the smarter guys at their school. In Japanese schools, they have those rankings when it comes to tests and stuff. And, this guy's one of the top testers for their school. So, he gets hired by Ayumu's mom to tutor her. Which, obviously this is going to be a real nightmare for Ayumu. But her reaction to her mom about this, when her mom brings a guy over and explains that she hired him to tutor her, is genuine. She's clearly very afraid of this guy. She doesn't want this at all, and mom doesn't pick up on it at all, and she's just like, look, I paid the guy, just let him tutor you. And that also kind of took me out of it. I don't know how accurate that is in the Japanese culture, but that was just kind of like, if my daughter is terrified of this guy, the first thing I would think of is, does this fucker rape her? And then I would probably beat the shit out of him and ask him. So that's something that, more than the girl and her posse and her, her flipping from the victim to like 100% the bully, that kind of bothered me more. I would be honest, the first part is more of, I didn't see that. Really? And then this thing with the guy, the mom, and Ayumu is more like, really? I mean, if my daughter acted like that, this guy is not coming anywhere near my house. I'll fucking shoot him if he ever steps in my house again. So, that was a little bit like, But overall, for the rest of the story, the way that the subjects handle everything else, specifically the protagonist's metamorphosis from beginning of the story to the very end, I honestly feel is very inspirational. There's pain to take from the story, but there's also triumph to take from the story. And because the author manages to make you emphasize with Ayumu, you feel that pain, you also feel that triumph towards the end. Because Ayumu has to go through so much pain, it's really hard. I actually stopped reading it because it wasn't finished when I was reading it, and then I waited many years to actually pick it up again and see it all the way through. Just the fact that in anime and manga, you often see somebody getting beat up or they're getting bullied. Other people see them, other bystanders or passersby see it, and they choose to ignore it so that they don't become part of that problem, so that that problem doesn't become a part of their own lives. And I think this story specifically, it takes a while, but it eventually addresses that, and I think it addresses it well. Not just Ayumu's struggle, which in and of itself is a good story, but just the fact that they chose to address that specifically, which you see all the time, but then it's just sort of, well, that's just how it is. That's not how it is. People fucking see this shit happening, and maybe if you're walking past a guy on the street, you can just walk past and that's the end of it. But when this shit's happening in your school life, in your own classroom, you have to take a stance on it. You can't just ignore it forever, for a whole year, for 2 years, for 3 years. Japanese high school is only 3 years. But I mean, my point being is it's not an event that you can just walk past by and then you ignored it, you're past it. When it's happening in your own classroom day after day after day, you can't just ignore it because you're either enabling it or you're becoming a part of it. It's that simple. So I know this is a longer recording than normal, but personally the story has a lot of attachment to me. It's mostly because of the cutting, not because of the bullying. But the bullying itself, this is a take I wanted to see made on it. I wanted to see somebody basically take a stand against it, and in a more realistic way. And I feel that's what life is. So, check us out on Facebook. Search up Planet Tyro. You can check out all of our other YouTube videos, www.planettyro.com. We're also on iTunes. We got apps for smartphones. I don't know any of that stuff. Dumb, we'll put it on the screen, I guess. You can follow me at @the_oldboy and pick my brains. I mean, you can send me messages directly there. I'll check it and I'll get back to you, but it's usually best to leave comments on our YouTube videos or on our Facebook group, start a discussion about something. Really appreciate it. I hope everybody picks up this title, checks it out. It's 20 volumes. I mean, it's a little bit of a meaty read, but I think it's a necessary read. Even if you're not really that into anime or manga, or you never read manga, I think it's something that should be read. See you guys around.